Welcome everybody to our Women in Cyber panel. My name is Jackie Blundell. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with Devo, we are a leading cloud-native security analytics platform, and we are super excited to be hosting this discussion today. Part of my role here at Devo is to make sure that we are providing engaging, useful information to the broader cybersecurity community. So this discussion today is one that I've personally been looking forward to and can't wait to hear all of the amazing insights, wisdom, and everything else from our amazing panelists. But before we do that, I would be remiss if I didn't do some housekeeping. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see some engagement tools. The smiley face is where you can find your reaction emojis. So feel free to give us a like, a smile, a heart, whatever it might be throughout this discussion. That's your way to engage with us. All windows that you see on your screen can be resized and moved around to your liking. You'll also notice that we have a Q&A box. So we are taking questions at the end of this panel. So as things pop up in your mind as we're chatting, feel free to put those in that box and we'll get to as many as we can toward the end of this discussion. Okay, that's enough of my busy, boring talk. Kayla Williams, CISO at Devo, is here to moderate this panel. So I am gonna disappear and turn things over to her.
Thanks, Jackie. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As we all know, March is Women's History Month, and earlier, also this month, we celebrated International Women's Day. As we observe this month, we wanted to take the opportunity to have an honest discussion about how we encourage and support women who are pursuing careers in cyber. Recent research from Cybersecurity Ventures indicates that women held only 25% of cybersecurity jobs globally in 2022. And further research from Accenture found that women only held 17% of Fortune 500 CISO positions in 2021. So the good news, right? Progress has been made. It's clear, though, that we still have some work to do. Today, our panelists will share their personal experiences. I'll share mine as well. And we'll hear some stories that may be a little bit confronting, may be a little bit uncomfortable for the women who've gone through them, but we want to be honest so that you can all learn from them and make sure that similar situations are prevented in the future, whether you are a woman experiencing them or an ally. So today is really just focused about finding solutions to a still persistent problem that we have across the cybersecurity landscape. So without further ado, we'll start with some introductions. Naomi, we'll start with you.
Hey everyone, I'm Naomi. This is what I look like. It is so cool to be here. I'm a huge fan of you, Kayla, and Devo also, and also the panelists on this call. I'm so excited to be here because I've been in technology for over like 20 years now. God, I'm old. But it's been kind of like this recurring theme where we talk about these problems of not having enough women in cybersecurity and technology. And I'm really ready to talk about solutions. I'm so glad you put together this panel, Devo, because I am done talking about like the problem. Let's just talk about solutions. I'm here for it.
Yeah, me too. So thank you for that, Naomi. Samara, which by the way, we are
Hey.
not related. We are not related. I should probably put that out. There's no nepotism here. I mean, we could be.
We could be. Exactly, yeah. Distant cousins or something. So Samara Williams, I am Senior Manager of Security Engineering at New Relic. My team is the Vulnerability Research and Response team. We handle all product level vulnerabilities, essentially. And I'm super excited to be here with Naomi, with Kyla. Is it Kyla, right? My new friend? Yeah, so we're going to have a good time. Looking forward to it.
Yes, thank you, Samara. And Kyla.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm Kyla. Good morning. Happy Hump Day. I am the founder and CEO of Bits and Bytes Cybersecurity Education, which is an international nonprofit that's dedicated to educating and equipping vulnerable populations with cybersecurity awareness. I started the nonprofit when I was 14 years old, and now I'm 20 and I'm a junior at Stanford University studying computer science and international relations. So cyber is my language. I love cyber, and I'm super excited, as my panelists shared, to talk about how we can start these solutions really early in the pipeline, because that's really where the most change happens.
And I just want to be the first to say, like, oh my gosh, when I was 14 years old, I was hanging out in parking lots at bowling alleys. So that's incredible. Like, well done. I'm so impressed by you. So thank you so much for being here today. We're really looking forward to hearing your perspective. Yes, hearts. Thank you. So we'll start kicking off with some questions. I think the first and foremost thing that we would like to understand is, what are some challenges that you've faced throughout your careers? What did you learn from it, and how did it shape your approach going forward? And I think we'll start with Samara.
Yeah, so this is an easy one for me. I think my biggest challenge that I've faced in this sort of career that I've taken on is that in any given room I walk into, there's not anybody that looks like me. And when there is, it's like instant family, right? And that's fantastic. But also, right, there's a comfort level or issue there. And I tend to be very comfortable in my skin and around anybody and everybody. But that's also been like learned since I was younger and coming up and so on and so forth. So over time, I just developed certain ways of building rapport quickly. And that was my way of coping with this. But I still think it's a problem for others who maybe can't build rapport with folks as quickly. So I have a perfect example. When I was coming up, right, and I started, anyone who's ever listened to a podcast or a talk of mine, my beginning was in a rotational program in cyber. It was fantastic. I got to rotate through 7 different companies, work in 7 different like cybersecurity teams. So it matured me in cyber quickly. But again, not a ton of folks in Columbus, Ohio that looks like Samara that is in cybersecurity, right? So what I decided was I would get to know the people around me. And since I already stood out physically, I decided I was going to stand out in other ways too, related to my skill set. So I found out what my counterparts maybe didn't enjoy doing, and that's what I leaned into. And that ended up being like talking with leaders, building process documentation, and like a myriad of other things, right? They all wanted to be hackers, and they're super cool, and a lot of them are hackers, and they're super smart, and I love them. But I decided to embrace that and stand out even more, right? And I ended up at the end of the program having, like 4 out of the 7 offers, because that was like the whole premise of the rotational program. But essentially, I decided to lean in. That was my approach to those challenges.
That's amazing. Naomi?
I'll say Samara is amazing, and yeah, I've actually met her in real life, and she's even more amazing than she was very humbly telling us about the rotational program. There's like so much more in your career, like Samara, really. Talk about all that.
Yeah, but that was just the beginning.
So, I would say like in the beginning of my career, it was difficult for me because I didn't understand why I would be treated differently. Like I always just assumed like if you're good at what you do, it doesn't even matter what your gender is or what you look like, right? Like, but I learned that so quick, like not quick, maybe 5 years later, where I'm like, hey, why am I not getting the same assignments or the promotions or the opportunities as other people? And I could not get that past me. Like I was like, it should be a meritocracy, right? It should be. But it didn't really click until I just started looking around and be like, what evidence do I have that says that maybe it's a little different for me? And then from that information, and by the way, I did realize there is bias everywhere. How can I use that information to my advantage? What can I do to myself or for others that can make myself stand out? Like Samara was saying, like, what can I do for myself? And in that case, I realized I have to stand up for myself. I have to start advocating for myself, for others, and say like, hey, it's not cool for you to be treating me this way, or it's not cool for you to be putting down other women, or not even giving us the benefit of the doubt, right? Like those are the kind of things that now I do that was different than when I started, which was like, hey, everyone's cool. Everyone's a meritocracy. Everyone's going to treat me the same. No, that's not the case, unfortunately, because we are all human. We all make mistakes. And that's okay. Now that I know that, I can stand up for myself and for others. And so I don't know what your question was actually, Kayla, but I'll just go with that.
No, that's what you've learned, right? You've learned from it, and to speak up. I think that's something that was kind of like the underlying line there, right? You learn to speak up and take care of yourself, where maybe before you didn't have the wherewithal to do something like that until you learned. Kyla, how about you?
Yeah, happy to hop in here. And I think I feel like it's interesting because I tackle it from a slightly different perspective, like just being in more classrooms, I guess now, and seeing what that is like. And I feel like it's funny because it's a lot of the same as what you guys are explaining in the industry. There's a lot of classrooms where I'll be the only woman or the only like woman of color, and it's really interesting, like having to navigate those sort of settings when your identity is so central to the security experience that you have. So I feel like every time I am in one of those rooms, I just feel like this urge to get more young women and get more people of different identity backgrounds to join in with me, because that's so critical that we have everybody's voice in the room. But I would say like one of the challenges is just like, I guess, getting into cyber itself, the barriers to entry that there are. I would say like urge industry to sort of start to knock down some of those barriers, whatever that might look like. For example, I was just at a competition in DC that was surrounding national security and cybersecurity called Cyber 912. And Stanford took home the gold, by the way. But I think one thing just going into that competition is the fact that there are so many barriers to progression in a space like national security that for decades, right, it has been led by, a certain demographic of individuals. And so you're really rising up and flipping the table and being a new voice in the room. So number one, making a name for yourself there. Number two, just understanding the lingo that we speak in cyber. There's so many acronyms and so many different words that we say that for young people who are approaching this subject, it's not like a biology class where you learn these things and you know what a cell is or a mitochondria is, etc. It's new things like SIEM or the NSA and what do they do, and understanding all these different like acronyms that have to do with cyber. So I would say, like, for example, that's one barrier to entry that we can easily knock down, right? Just by explaining what those three letters mean. And for young people, that speaks volumes and makes a difference and might even change the way that they see cyber as a part of their career.
Yeah, I think you touched upon something that I would kind of like us to focus on for a minute. You said about a certain demographics having expectations, which we all know there is a lot of diversity out there, and diversity of thought, diversity in the physical qualities of a person, the intellectual and emotional as well. So what are your thoughts? And this is for anybody to respond to. I'm not going to call anyone out in particular, but what are your thoughts on the upholding specific points of view on executive presence? It's been something I have personally have been told. You don't have executive presence. You have to cut your hair. You have to wear dresses. You have to do certain things by a certain demographic telling me this. So that, that's my personal story side is, I've had these discussions before, and yes, my hair was cut. It was donated. I'll put it out there, and I made this certain individual pay for that haircut. But that has had some lasting impact on me emotionally. So have any of you have any experience like that, or do you have a point of view on the executive presence expectation?
To define, isn't it? Like, it's totally the eye of the beholder. It's like, what's executive presence? Well, it's like whatever I'm doing, essentially. And yet it's so frustrating, Kayla. And you did tell us that story about the haircut. And didn't I say, like, I hope that guy's bald now or whatever? I'm evil.
Yes,
we
were very graphic. Yes,
we were very graphic. I'm so sorry about that. It's my ADHD kicking in. So I would say yes. I've had conversations that are just completely inappropriate in the moment. When I look back at them like years later, I'm like, I should have said this XYZ. I should have like told him to sit down or whatever it is. But in the moment, you're just caught unaware. You're like, I did not expect this level of unprofessionalism coming from a senior level person. Do not expect it. So this is what I would suggest for women who do end up in those situations. Like, have a common language that you can share with other women and share these tactics. Be like, here's what we can say in the moment. Practice those things. So if somebody says you should cut your hair because you don't look whatever executive presence enough, you can be like, well, that's a really good point you made there. I disagree, or something. Like, you say it like that forcefully in the moment, and then you don't even be apologetic about it and be like, don't say I'm sorry, I disagree. Just like, well, thank you for your information, I disagree, or something, and just be really, really upfront about it. And that's what I think women in general are not great at. We are not good at standing up for ourselves and just being in the moment and understanding when something terrible is being like happening to us. We don't know how to respond because we're not expected to respond in that way. We don't have that level sometimes, that level of language or that level of confidence to be able to do that. And I'm saying step back, practice this on your own, share tactics with other ladies, and then we get better as a group. And then by the end of it, hopefully this generation coming up, the guys, the people in charge, they're going to start respecting women for the merit that we bring to the table, not just because we are women.
Absolutely. And, you know, I mean, not to defend myself in that situation, I was 25 years old and I didn't know that I could respond that way. So I think one takeaway that I would like all of our listeners here to have is that you do have a voice. And you, to your point, Naomi, stand up for yourself. It doesn't mean, you know, cage fighting, throwing things around the room and really going off on, you know, a tangent. It's just being respectful and saying, you know what, thank you, I appreciate your input, but I'm good being me, and having that self-awareness and confidence. And I didn't have that back then.
It starts so young too. Like we have to teach our young girls to stand up for themselves. Don't let boys treat them badly. Oh, they just like you. Okay, they're treating you terribly. No, don't stand for that. Like, and especially like we should be teaching the girls from a young age, especially like Kyla's group and like before that. So it'll be like, if you like to do something, do it. Don't let somebody tell you can't do tech, or don't let somebody say like you're not a boy, you can't like this stuff. Like that's when the girls need to stand up and just be like, no.
Yes, I have a 13-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old daughter, and my 13-year-old is really into anime, and she's really getting into video game design. That is what she wants to do right now. And even in, you know, 7th grade, there's boys that say that's not for you. So I've already, you know, I'm having those conversations now, and I would implore all of our listeners to not be afraid to broach the topic with your children, whether it's a daughter or a son or other. Have those conversations and help children to understand their boundaries, right? I think that's very important, because as you grow up, you learn to have self-respect. And then you aren't going to take that type of messaging to heart, because it's not indicative of something wrong with you. If someone comes to you and says that, you know, you got to flip that a bit, for sure.
Yeah, I can jump in here a bit too, because I have 2 boys who are, they love to judge each other because they want to be the same, but they're also super different. And it's about accepting people for who they are, no matter age, what they look like. And I've had a particular, you know, experience with this as a queer woman in cyber. I tend to dress androgynous. I think I find myself to be lucky because I can shop from like 2 different types of stores, men's and women's. It's actually a problem. I spend money on clothes way too much for someone who works at home. But I've gotten from mentors and women in, unfortunately, the older generations that are saying, if you don't look a certain kind of way, if you don't dress a bit nicer, you know, you may not be taken seriously as a leader. And it is my choice to reject that completely and be intentional about being myself, staying true to myself, because there's a queer cyber baby out there who sees Samara dressing in whatever the hell she wants, a blazer and, you know, sneakers, and still giving talks and still doing what I want to do. So that's what I'll say about that.
Absolutely. Yes.
And just to add in there, I think that the biggest impact is made when like young people see these sorts of examples of people with different lived experiences and people who dress up with, walk into the room with a pink blazer on or high heels on, and they're making the executive decisions. Like that's so empowering to not have that picture of, you know, a hacker in a basement being like the most important figure in the room. Like I think that is what flips the script. And I would urge, like from the leadership level too, if there's a way, like the small tactics that you can use to raise the voices of those in the room. I think the best leaders that I've seen are the ones that, you know, call out if somebody hasn't spoken yet, like make sure they're raising their voice and say like, Samara, what do you think about that? I know you haven't heard I know we haven't heard from you on this topic yet, and really like know each person by name and know that everybody in the room is bringing something very unique based off of their identity. Like not only, Samar, you said like accepting people for who they are, but not only accepting them, but celebrating the fact that they're in the room and they're bringing their voice to the table.
100%. One more thing, Kayla. One more thing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I've never gone to a conference and ran into somebody and they say, that sweater you wore at the last conference, didn't care for it. No, it wasn't a thing. They always remember how I made them feel during my talk, not the way that I looked. So I choose, again, and I'm using that word explicitly, I choose to focus on how I make people feel as opposed to their attraction to me or otherwise, right? So.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. People will always judge. That's just inherent in human beings. But it's how you respond to that judgment and what you do with it. And I think, Samara, walking away from a conference knowing how you've made someone feel is more, it's going to be more of a lasting impact. And that's the same for as a people manager, as a parent, as a friend, as a child. Like focusing on how you make people feel, I think is just wonderful advice across the board and a great way to live your life. So kind of switching gears a little bit here, because I want to, as I mentioned before, I want to focus on, what we can do about finding solutions. I'd like to ask the group, and Kyla, I'll start with you here. What are we doing right and what are we doing wrong? And, more specifically, for our allies that have joined us today, what does true allyship look like to you?
Oh my gosh, this is such a big question. But thank you for asking it. I think it's so important. I would say for what are we doing right? I think there is, it's important to celebrate the fact that we are doing things right? Like there are more women joining cyber. We're getting, at least every year, that statistic that I see increases a little bit in terms of how many women are working as professionals in cyber. So it's super exciting. And I think from the very low levels too, of the grassroots perspective, I see that too, of more programs that are spinning out, more programs and organizations that are getting funded to support young women, whether that be NSA Gen Cyber program or Girls Who Code. There are just so many different grassroots organizations right now that are doing this sort of hard work from the ground level. So that has been really cool to see, I would say. And then also, I think areas for improvement, obviously, there are always ways we could do better. I would say, honestly, I feel as I said before, those barriers, knocking some of those barriers down, whatever that might look like, even knocking the barriers down to public service roles that are sort of could stand as really good entry-level roles for really good leaders that we have in the future. There seems to be a lot of barriers to that. And then I would say, also just having a awareness, personally, and when you're walking into a room, I think it really starts with inside. And I know that sounds cheesy, but even just small decisions that are made, when you're putting together a panel, realizing okay, who are you putting on the panel and how do they complement each other? Are there and then I heard this really good tip the other day, if you're having a women panel, are you talking about topics that are women specific, or are you just allowing them to talk about cyber, which is how it should be? You know what I mean? Allowing them to talk about their expertise. So that small decisions that are made can really trickle down into larger impacts. And I think if more people start to realize that it does start internally, that's where we'll see the most change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to point out that all of these wonderful women have been on other webinars that we've done. It's not just for Women's Month or International Women's Day. Just to add to your point, Kyla, we have awesome SOC Analyst Appreciation Day coming up in October. And these women have all been involved in talking about their roles. It's not just for today. So I just want to kind of put that disclaimer out there for that.
Yes, I will use Dio as the example for how these things should be done.
Yeah, no, it's all fair points. I do feel, that when we have our allies who are here today and who are going to be listening to this on their own timelines, it's really important to kind of not just read the room, but to understand who is in the room. And to the point made earlier, and I can't recall which one of you ladies said it, but knowing names and being able to say, hey, Kyla, can what are your thoughts on this? And giving that space to be able to interact with the group and be a part of the decision-making process. Because it's not enough just to have a woman in the room.
Yeah.
Or another marginalized person that's in the room, just to have that tick the box. Ticking the box is not the point. The point is having the diversity of thought. And that is what's extremely important.
Yeah.
At least from talking to you ladies. Yeah.
Well, I was going to add one thing. It's the difference between giving them a seat in the room and pulling up a chair versus handing them the microphone.
Yeah. That's a very good point. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll pass my panelists to Ad. I'm curious to hear what you think.
I feel like I've talked a lot. Naomi, you want to jump in?
Talk more. Okay, so to answer Kayla's original question, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? I think awareness is great. We're doing great with awareness. However, if you look at the people in the audience list, these are already people who believe in this stuff. Like we've got the allies, we've got the women. You people on this call don't need to hear this. You all know this. What we need to do is tell the people who actually need to hear this information and get them on this call. Like that is that is the issue, like to me. So the thing that we're doing great, awareness. Yep, we got that. We got that real good. International Women's Month. Yep, we got that. Check, check, check. But now, listen, the people who actually need to hear this stuff, they are not being reached because they don't think they have the problem. No one is ever a villain in their own story. And it is so true when it comes to this kind of stuff. So again, it comes down to self-advocacy. It comes down to true allyship. And what I mean by this is don't be performative. Don't be like, oh, I'm such a good person. I'm here attending this webinar and I'm going to make everyone else feel good about that. Or like, I'm going to help write a book for women in cybersecurity, whatever it is. Like these kind of things are performative. What we need people to do in the quiet conversations, in the Slack messages, in the meetings, you need to stand up for somebody who you believe in, who happens to be a different gender than you, or maybe just a woman, and stand up for them and say like, this person, I believe in them. I'm going to advocate for them. And don't do it for any kind of like or like subscribe.
Accolades.
Like you don't do it for that. Like do it because it's the right freaking thing to do, and you know this. Yep. And again, I'm preaching to the choir. We need more people who can listen and be self-aware and understand that they are also part of the problem. But we can't have that solution. We can't have that conversation until we start reaching out to the people who aren't ready to listen.
Yeah, absolutely. I love your energy, Naomi. It's I'm being very honest. I love it. It's because it's just so, reassuring and kind of, validating that we are not all, here because, we're trying to tick a box, right? It's now up to all of us to take these lessons learned and kind of move forward. One of the things that I struggle with personally, and again, this is like another personal story, is other women, right? It's not necessarily men that are the problem. So for me, just a brief example, back actually 10 years ago, it was November of 2013, I was provided with the wonderful opportunity of going overseas with my job on a year-long secondment where they paid for my work visa and I had an apartment and stuff to work directly with the CISO and his executive team. And my biggest critics and the ones that were leaving me crying at my desk and at home and on the car ride home were the other women on my team that were dragging me down with very disgusting language about, oh, she got chosen because she's sleeping with the boss. She isn't qualified for this. And it was women. And yes, it's probably coming from a place of jealousy or envy or whatever degree you want to put it to. But I think, the elephant in the room and the thing that needs to be acknowledged is that it's not just men. Women are pitted against each other, whether it's actual or not is a different story, and are made to feel like they are competing for the same roles or just competing with one another in general. And I'd like to hear, your thoughts on how you've addressed, when it's been other women that have put you down or in a compromising situation of the sort.
So I'm going to jump in here, but I'm also going to jump back a little bit to what something Naomi said, because I have a little bit of a different perspective. I'm constantly sort of on the hook to educate people about the communities that I'm part of. And it's exhausting. And that's not at all what you were saying, Naomi. But at the same time, it is not necessarily our job to treat these people how to be better humans, right? We can model the behavior, and we can criticize it when we see it. We can correct it when we see it. But the approach that I tend to try and take is building that tribe of people, like-minded but diverse individuals who will continue to inspire and influence others to act the same way, and sort of build that way that I think is promotes longevity, right? Instead of strife. Not at all what you were saying, but that's the approach. You know what I'm saying? I know. And it's really hard to like follow that and kind of like oppose it, if you will. But that's kind of the approach that I've taken in past years. That's been beneficial for us. But yes, I have had some women. Actually, you know, I talked about how people remember how you make them feel, right? And I think we could have the same situation happen to us, and the person doing it could be a man or a woman, but the one that we're going to remember because it hurts just a little bit more is the woman, right? The woman who told me I shouldn't dress like a dude because nobody's going to take me serious. The woman who told me that if I continue to make people laugh all the time, that I'm going to be seen as a jokester and not a leader. And actually, people love to be around me. we love to laugh together. But I have had probably more of those situations really hurt my soul as opposed to the men out there. So I'm really just agreeing with what you said.
Yeah, it's a challenge, right? Because growing up, I was bullied by women. Girls, right? Children, as we were growing up through high school and things like that. And, you know, I think as women, female leaders, it's really important for us to instill in those around us that, I think, Samara, maybe you said it before, like the little boy that's like teasing you because he likes you. That's not the right way to you know, to raise children, you know, but it's also not okay for girls to have cliques and to make fun of each other for their clothes or their hair. I mean, social economic is like circumstances aside, it's just not kind. There's no reason to be cruel, because then you grow up competing against women. And, you know, I don't want my 13-year-old or my 6-year-old daughters to be the ones in the bathroom crying because a woman is bullying them. You know, I went through that, and I'm trying to break that cycle by teaching them empathy, by teaching them how to arm themselves with mechanisms to diffuse situations that I've only learned from being in the workplace, because I didn't have, you know, and I was born in the 80s, right? It wasn't in the 90s. It wasn't a thing. Bullying didn't exist. It was just kind of ignored, right? I mean, we've all learned as a society to do better. But back then, you know, my mom didn't know to teach me coping mechanisms. She didn't know that these things that I, you know, 20 years later, here I am remembering it and trying to help other women not be put in those situations. So I think as good just people, as good citizens, it's up to all of us to really hold ourselves, hold our peers and our children accountable. Because when they get into the workforce, they'll be fired. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to add on there, is I think like one thing we can do is kind of go back and ask sort of, why is this happening in the first place? Like, why are women feeling like they need to compete with each other? And then if you go back to that, like, is it because there are less opportunities for women to rise, and so therefore like we have to compete with each other? Or like just trying to figure out what is that root cause and then addressing that. Like, I know one thing that's helped me a lot is being in communities of women supporting women. And some of those communities I'll like name right here is just the girl security community. That's one that is a nonprofit that's helping build a community for women who are working in cyber and all across national security, and providing mentorship and all sorts of programming to help women feel like we belong and we have a space in the room. And so there are, I guess, like solutions out there. And then another one is, if it's not there, what they say, like, if there's no door, build a door. So I also am leading a group called GirlCon conference that happens every single year that unites together young people talking about technology, and specifically high schoolers. And so it's all young women who are kind of entering this space, just trying to get familiar with what it is. And immediately they're met with this large, grand community of other young women who are supportive of them, and know that there are opportunities out there for every single one of them. There's no reason or need to compete for anything. So kind of coming at it with that messaging that there's no reason to compete, there's opportunities for everyone. And if you lift someone up, that you get the best rewarding feeling from that. If you learn that early on, I do think those skills will translate to the workforce. So hopefully that's like a little bit of a taste of a solution. And I hope that that is that way. But yeah, I just want to offer that.
Kyla, you're amazing. You just, every time we talk like about things like this, you seem to have a solution, and it's just amazing. Wow, thank you so much for that. So I think we'll move on to just another quick question, if that's okay with the group here, unless anyone has anything further to add. No? Okay, thanks. So what can we, as in the industry at large, what can we do to encourage more women to like pursue the cybersecurity career path? Like we just had Kyla's wonderful input there. Is there anything else that we could do from a solutions perspective to get more folks at the table?
Yeah, I can go. So something that I've recently learned through an experience is, we talk about making room for folks. Kyla mentioned, pulling out the chair, giving the microphone. But I also try to show people where they fit, because naturally we want to belong somewhere, right? So giving the mic is cool, and giving them a seat at the table. But what table are we giving them a seat at? Is it one where they will feel fulfilled, right? Or are we throwing them into the lion's den that we just came from, right? So I have an example. I recently spoke at an HBCU conference. It was my favorite talk of all time, purely because of who was in the audience. I've never seen that many Black people in an audience that I've spoke at. And it was fantastic. It was inspiring. And they were all so sharp. And I couldn't understand why people sleep on this community, right? And during that talk, I challenged people that if they did not know where they fit in security, that I could tell them. I don't care what their skill was. I believe anybody belongs in security. It's just the right discipline, the right team, what have you, right? And I was there for an hour and a half after my talk, telling people where I thought they could pursue, right? And sometimes people just don't know, right? So it's like making yourself available, making space for them, and helping them find where they could potentially belong. It goes a very long way.
And if you don't mind, Samara, can you just define HBCU, please, for that don't know?
Yeah, historically Black colleges and universities.
Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
I think that's a fair point. People not knowing where they belong. We've done a panel before and put out some articles around non-traditional paths into security, and understanding where your skill sets really fit into security. I mean, I have a degree in accounting and I'm a CISO, right? I understood how to take those skills and have them be complementary to get me into security consulting and advisory and accreditation services, and building it up on the risk and control side. So absolutely, I think that, Samara, that's such a wonderful little nugget of advice there. And it's definitely something that I will take forward when I go and do things like that as well, and making sure that I have time set aside for those types of engagements. Naomi, is there anything from you?
I can add on to what Samara was saying. I mean, make that space for other women, but you could also show them like other women who do that work, right? So if you could see somebody in that role, like, oh, she's a CISO, that's so cool. I could see myself being a CISO too. Like, and from all different domains, like you got your SOC analyst, you got legal and compliance, you got all the different things. Try to really showcase other women in those roles. And then that would be empowering for younger girls, just to be like, oh, that's so cool. Like, they look like they're having the best time. They're having the best life ever, and they have the best career ever. I want to be like that person, right? And they could see themselves, because literally they could be like, oh, that person looks just like me. I could do that too. Like, so we need to maybe share those stories more.
Yeah. I mean, I say this at like a lot of places I go, but the first time that I saw and thought that I could be a woman in cyber was when I saw Felicity Smoke on The Arrow. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen that TV show, but
Yeah.
it was like a fictional character who was just this girl boss who would hack into systems in the basement and then help like the hero who was fighting bad guys in the above her. So it was just so empowering, and just speaks to what Naomi was saying.
Yeah. Speaking of, like, my first was, do you guys remember Inspector Gadget, the cartoon, and Penny with her watch? I was that kid that used to like pretend that my watch did. It was a Mickey Mouse watch. It did no such thing, but I pretended. And that, yeah, I just seeing women in different places, I think is really important. Completely agree.
I actually don't have one of those, but I was raised by a woman that did what she wanted when she wanted it, if that's what felt right to her. So that's something I'm trying to also instill in my daughter and boys.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So Naomi, what are your thoughts on, like reskilling? We kind of just touched upon it, like being like in those untraditional paths, but, do you have any like hot takes on the reskilling aspect, and maybe when you transfer in, or you're looking to transfer into the security role?
Yeah, the one kind of tip I give is really take a look at your body of work, your entire resume, everything that you've done in the past, and really try to find the things that are security related. Because I guarantee you, in your current job, no matter what it is, from nanny to teacher to anything, like literally anything, if it's not tech adjacent, I promise you, you are doing security stuff. You just might not know it. So think about the things, the time that you enabled two-factor authentication for some of your accounts. Maybe you verified some weird activity that was happening, like you had to reach back out to make sure that thing wasn't happening, right? Mm-hmm. Like, think about those past experiences and be like, how is this related to security? Because there's so many aspects of your life that are related to security. So think about that when you're putting together your resume. Highlight those things on your resume and say, here's my role, even though I had the title of financial analyst. Hey, I still did fraud. I still looked at risk. These are kind of things that all cybersecurity people will do. I'm sorry, not just cybersecurity, but information security professionals in general are really, really good at. They can see the forest, the trees in the forest, and they could be like, here are the things that I did that are security related. And they highlight those in their resume, right? I want that for you too.
Yeah, I think that's like a really good point. There was like an article I read recently on, I think it's on LinkedIn, about someone who's like, yeah, I hired a writer on my team, not to do tech writing, but to do security awareness and training, because they were creative. They could tell a story in a much more succinct manner, and they brought so much value to the team. So I think, Naomi, you hit the nail on the head there, like understanding how you can contribute to not just technical roles in security, whether it's info or cyber, but there are other ways to be included in the security industry. Marketing is another great example, right? We have some amazing women here helping with us today that they're working in the cybersecurity field. They're getting exposed to the technology and the lingo and the amazing people like yourselves here on the panel, and are able to contribute, focusing on their skill sets. So I think that's a really good point. So I think, our last question here that I'd like to touch upon, because I do want to leave some time for Q&A, is we'll start with Kyla on this one. What advice would you give to other women looking to grow their cybersecurity careers? And do you have any resources that you've leveraged for your own work? Since you are a CEO, don't want to discredit that at all, because that's amazing. But you are a university student as well.
Yeah. No, I love this question. I think there are so many resources out there, particularly free resources, that can be leveraged by students to at least get more familiar with the space. And I would say, honestly, because this is top of mind for me still, and this is very much a huge part of my college experience, is look out for competitions that are out there that will really give you sort of the real world perspective of what it might look like to spend a career in cyber, whether this be like I've taken part in not only this Cyber 912 comp, which I just came back from, but also like CCDC, which is the Collegiate Cyber Defense Competition, and then CPTC, which is the Collegiate Penetration Testing Competition. So if you have young ones at home, there's also one like Capture the Flag competitions for really young people. So send those to the people that you love and the young people in your life. And then I would say, like for rising professionals, there are, I know like sometimes some of these courses can seem inaccessible because they're so expensive, but if you even just like leveraging the resources there are online have been massive help to me. So leverage communities that grow on LinkedIn, like LinkedIn groups or Facebook groups. My Facebook groups have helped me like apply for programs and then doors open from that. So leverage like Facebook groups. And then there's also this really good community that I'll suggest. It's called the NCWIT, National Security for Women in Information Technology. And that group has added so much dimension to my experience, and just going to conferences with them, the WESIS conference, or their RSA conference, like all these experiences are better when they're done together with a group of people. So I would say look for community everywhere you go and try and lean into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely right. I just want to see if there's any way that we can get like a list of your resources out to the group, because some of them I hadn't even heard of before. So thank you for that. That's new information for me. And I love to learn about these things. So thank you very much for that. But we'll turn over to Samara. What advice do you have?
Yeah, so I'm the type of leader that believes in individualization, right? So the whole one size fits all, or going to one particular place or being a part of one particular thing, I think it has to do with what works for you as an individual. But I think where that starts is getting to know yourself as well, and doing the work to get to know yourself, to find what works best for you, but also do something that you've never done before. So like I'm kind of contradicting myself, but get to know yourself, try things that work for you, but then also get out of your head and do something different. See what works with others. See what, you know what I'm saying? So I hope that makes sense, because now that I'm going through it, I'm like, whoa, what just happened here? But that's essentially what I did a lot, getting out of my comfort zone and leaning into my strengths, but then also jumping in to some of those things that made me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Finding
I
the
think
balance. That's what it is. It's balance.
Yeah,
right?
I think that's great life advice anyway. I mean, I hark back to like my experience of going over to England. I just said yes, and I figured all the rest out later. And I didn't mention it here, but at the time I left my 3-year-old daughter here with her dad in the US, and I went. And I mean, she's 13 now. She doesn't remember. And I ask her occasionally, like, if she remembers, and she doesn't. But I mean, at the time it was a very hard decision to make, but it's paid off dividends for me. In 10 years, I've gone from entry level information security, assurance consultant to CISO. I don't know. I kind of think I made the right choice, and it's just being comfortable with yourself to make those choices and in the face of adversity. I think that's a great point, Samara. Naomi?
I mean, just say yes. You said that. I'm like, yeah, that's actually amazing. That's perfect advice. If anything, I think you could take that away and just be, yeah, just say yes to things. Opportunities, when people ask you to help them out with something, or be on a podcast, or write a post on something, whatever it is, like, just say yes and see what happens. Like it's only going to help you. I don't understand how people sometimes say no to opportunities, but man, that opportunity was put at your door for a reason. Like, just say yes, see what happens. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. I try to live that way, but being in risk management at the same time, you always go, right? It's like, how do you reconcile those two sides of your brain? But I think, kind of circling back to some of the things that are made before we jump into the Q&A, Do you ladies have any advice from what you've seen, you know, in your careers thus far about women who are wanting to transfer into the secure a career shift, right? I don't want to say transfer into, but they decided to change careers. And clearly, we mentioned it before, people always judge and worrying about ageism, worrying about sexism, worrying about the way they look, how they act, things like that. Like, do you have any advice for anybody that's in that situation, and maybe some resources that you know of that they could read up on, something like that?
My favorite genre I'm a listener. I don't like to stare at books. Is self-help. I love to hear different perspectives, even the ones that I disagree with, and then, absorb them, get rid of the stuff I don't care about, keep the things that mean something to me. And if somebody says something and it just makes you feel like trash, bum. I want to say I want to say another word, but maybe I should have been other people in the audience. But
good censorship.
Yeah, bum. So that's what I'll say for now.
Naomi?
So the question was for helping people who are older, women.
Yeah, who may be doing trying to do a career shift.
A career shift. Oh, there's so many great resources. Oh my gosh. Okay. Let's see. I just came back from a SANS conference. Guys, go check this out, SANS.org. They have a wonderful resource for new to cyber. So if you're reskilling and you're looking to move from a different career, starting over, I guess, good for you guys. We need you. Come on in. New to cyber, NEW, the number 2, and then cyber. So SANS.org has wonderful resources for people who are new to cyber. That will also link out to many other resources. The government has a bunch of them. The NIST, NICE. Forget what it stands for at this moment. Something, cybersecurity education, National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education. There it is. So they actually have a whole bunch of resources for people who are trying to transition. They will take your current skill set and you pick the things out of a drop down box, and then you hit enter, and then it just gives you a list of all the things that you might be able to do in cybersecurity. It's literally so easy. You're like, okay, here are my skill sets. And yes, it's kind of in general buckets. Hey, I'm good at critical thinking. I'm good at detail stuff, whatever it is. And then it's going to be okay, what might you be good at? And then it gives you the path into it, what kind of career path you're looking at, what kind of salary range, how many jobs are open in that state. That is an amazing resource. I think is it NIST.gov? NIST, something like this. It's crazy, but start with SANS. That's an amazing resource. They've got, I did a keynote for them, so you can listen to that one. All the presentations are free. You can read the white papers. You can read research articles. You can read all the things about transitioning into cybersecurity, especially as a more mature professional. If you're worried about that kind of stuff, and I will let you know it is possible, but it is difficult. So really, really work hard. Get yourself out there. Say yes to things. Never say that you can't do it. Really advocate for yourself. Have other people advocate for you. Right. Yeah. Really put in that work. And yes, you can do it. We believe in you.
Oh, thank you, Naomi. That is so nice. I love that. It's true. It's very true. Mm-hmm. So flipping over into some of the questions we have here from a super fierce woman in cyber that I know, Megan, and I'm just calling her out because, hey, Megan. She has a great question. Can you share examples of other women in cyber that inspire you? Because she'd like to know so she can follow them. Naomi? Samara, go ahead.
No, I was actually going to suggest that we do a LinkedIn post or something where we all kind of share so that it's an easy click and follow, because I know I'll miss people if I just try to list them. Right?
Yeah, okay. So I think
spelling and all that stuff.
That's perfect. I think as an action item for me, for all of you out there, what we'll do is we will put on the Devo LinkedIn page and on the Devo Twitter page this list of awesome women that inspire us. We'll put in these resources that Kyla and Naomi mentioned before. We'll get it all in writing so that you can just find us on social media and have those resources at your fingertips. I think you can even bookmark them inside those things. So that way, you're able to go back to them and reference them in the future. So that's a great suggestion, Samara. Thank you for that. So we have an excited one here from Amanda. I got my first cyber job. Woohoo! Congratulations. You'll be doing cybersecurity for ICS, Industrial Control Systems. It's a very male-dominated field. So she would like to know if you have any advice on how she can succeed in ICS as a woman in her first cyber role. And I'll open that up to any of you ladies that would like to respond.
I'm curious what role it is specifically, whether it's like SOC, threat intelligence, or otherwise. But I've found a lot of success thinking about the unconventional partnerships within companies, especially when you're looking at ICS, getting a lay of the land of the company as a whole, talking to people in finance, talking to people in HR, talking to people, and seeing what they think of cyber and what they know about security and what they could be looking or expecting from your team, or maybe they don't know anything. There's also an opportunity to educate people. And I don't want to guarantee, but I'm pretty sure your counterparts aren't doing that. So.
Yeah, I think one thing that I would say is understanding the business context and how that relates to your role. So you can be very specific about how security risks impact the business, especially revenue. If you can say this risk impacts revenue or brand reputation, it will get more eyes for sure.
Yes,
I think that's
thinking outside of like threats and vulnerabilities constantly in the bigger picture, making it personal for people as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I think that 30,000 foot perspective is so critical. And I would say like I think Samara was like getting at this too, is like you bring so much to the table that like if you lean into the strength that you bring, like your voice will be like celebrated in the room. And I think being new to the field is scary and terrifying, but if you have coffee chats and get to know everybody in the office, and then also try and understand like where are the gaps, like what challenges can you fill, like what bridges can you build between two different teams that have never talked before that can now start collaborating. Like try and find gaps where you can be the value add and have that unique value.
Yes, thank you for that, Kyla. We have a question here from Kevin that says, what does success look like? How do we know how we are doing and if we're improving allyship? Are there any thoughts on that,
That's my boy,
ladies?
Kevin. That's my dude. I'm kind of interested to see what Naomi thinks about this one. Can I put you on the spot, my friend?
OKRs for this? Oh gosh. I mean, like, are we winning against cybercrime? No. Like, the top metric for me is like, are we winning against cybercrime? No. Like, I want to see just fewer breaches in general. If you're a hiring manager, your metric might be a little different. Like, if you are trying to reduce risk and manage risk better for your organization, how does that look like? And what does that mean for building your teams? Does that mean hiring people with different perspectives? Probably. Like, maybe part of your problem is you're only thinking one way. So think about it this way. And then very naturally, once you start realizing what the true metric is, which is trying to reduce cyber crime and improve on breaches and things, like, and protecting our companies and our data and our privacy, like, these are the things that will naturally increase the number of women in cybersecurity. It will. So if you think about it that way, like, flip it on its head. Don't be like, I'm just going to hire a woman for this role. Like, no, that's not the point. The point is to do better in your job and get better at cybersecurity. Okay, got it. What does that mean for my team? And then think about it that way. And then it will very naturally include diversity of thought. And this is what Kayla mentioned earlier. Women have a very interesting way and perspective on things. And you really want to lean in on this as a leader, as a hiring manager. This is something that you need to start recognizing, the strengths of different types of thinkers. So neurodivergent people, right? Like, these are the kinds of thinkers that you might need on your team. Don't just hire the same type of person. Really, really consider the fact that, hey, maybe the way we've been doing things all along is not the right way. And there is a new way of thinking about it. And what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I agree. I see a comment here, and it's a question and a comment from Sharon. Is there something specific that we'd like to see, like the audience do, like an assignment? I would personally say, like, going back and looking over your hiring practices, looking at your barriers to entry, making sure that, before you start to do interviews, that you do have diverse candidates in the pipeline, or while you're doing your interviews, and that you ensure that you are opening up and creating equal opportunities for everyone. But I think if you check us out on LinkedIn, but if you go to linkedin.com and you just search for Devo Inc., you'll see us, you'll see our logo. We can address some of these things because we are at the top of the hour here. And I don't want to, cut short the conversation. So I think if we move it to social media, it'll get a bigger audience, and you can come back to it at any time. So I want to thank you all so much for being here and for sharing your experiences and your, your stories and your hopes for the future and the recommendations, right? The whole point of this was to have solutions. And I think, we came up with several. So thank you so much, ladies. I continue to be in awe of you. And I will, surely follow you all on social media if I'm not already. And, I love the emojis coming across here. I'm hoping that the audience can see them as well, because this is amazing. Like the clapping and the hearts, and it's like such a motivator. So there comes some more. So thank you all so much. And, we look forward to the next discussion. So take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for having me.